Hello and welcome. I'm Lacey from OurSay, and we're coming to you from sunny Dandenong here in the council chambers. Late last year, the City of Greater Dandenong ran an online consultation with OurSay asking your views about the environment and how they can improve and build their environment plan. 27 ideas and over 480 votes were submitted on the OurSay platform, and the ideas and comments touched on a range of themes, but the most voted for were around density and urban development and climate change and carbon emissions. Today we're talking about these two topics. We have Natasha Palich from the Council Alliance for a Sustainable Built Environment, welcome, and Greg Hunt from the South East Council's Climate Change Alliance here with us as well. And on the other side, from the City of Greater Dandenong, we're joined by Mayor Sean O'Reilly, thank you, and Ed Cotter as well. So thank you to our panel. Well, let's get straight into it. And the first theme we're discussing is around urban development and density, which is a very hot topic we found. In fact, the top two ideas were about this issue. Brendan Nicol raised issues around access to sunlight and overshadowing, car parking and too many vehicles on the road, pedestrian movement and public transport as well were raised as key concerns. And it's really interesting when you think about local council and planning and how much that does have an impact on these things, which are environmental issues. Desi Aton commented on the location of high density development projects and the possibility of the municipality becoming overcrowded, undervalued and overpolluted as well. Well, Natasha, I wanted to start with you because
Sure.
Population growth is one of the key drivers in increasing urban density. I mean, there's obviously when you have more people, you've got to put them somewhere, and that's what's increasing development all around the world, not just here in Dandenong.
That's right.
Greater Melbourne's population in 2011 was just over 4 million, and that's being forecast to double to 7.8 million by 2051. So I guess my first question to you is, we're talking about urban development and density here. Where are we going to put all these people?
You're right. The population of Melbourne is going to grow quite substantially, and it is my hope that people will be living in good quality, comfortable housing. Ultimately, I think that's what we're aiming for, and I think that the best solution for Melbourne and the City of Greater Dandenong is to deliver a mix of housing types. So we will have some growth in the suburban house. We'll have some growth in, I hope, to see some reconfiguration of our existing suburban buildings to perhaps look at different ways of living. So instead of having a particular family in a house, potentially sharing that house or using it in other ways. So reconfiguration of our existing stock in innovative ways. I think that there'll be a continuation of the urban infill that we're seeing, and I think that that's an appropriate solution as well to make use of some of these sites that potentially could have a higher density on the site. And then of course there is going to need to be a higher density solution as well in an appropriate area, not just in Greater Dandenong, but across Melbourne. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I mean, what are some examples from around the world where that have successfully implemented higher density urban development? I mean, how have they worked? What can we learn from them?
Well, Singapore has done a significant transformation to a livable higher density scenario, and they had a plan that essentially focused on putting people first. And so, with that strategy as their primary goal, they came up with a range of actions on how to achieve that. And some of the things that they looked at was making efficient use of the space. So planning for the future growth, not only in the immediate future, but in the long-term future as well. Designing for the community, so inclusive places that allowed people to establish a connection, to develop a sense of shared history, so establishing a community, including green spaces, developing affordable mixed-use residential areas, making public spaces work, so making public spaces usable, not just neglecting that little corner, but turning it into something that actually has a function. Perhaps it's some shade, perhaps it's a seat, perhaps it's a little pop-up whatever shop. Prioritising public transport and sustainable public transport was another thing. Developing or encouraging a sense of safety in the streets, so by that it's having active streets instead of passive streets, so people interacting with the street, looking at the street, so that there's a sense of safety being part of being out in the urban area, and being innovative with your ideas and what housing is and what an urban space is. So I think that's quite a remarkable outcome for Singapore. Shall I talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of density? Of density. One of the main perceived disadvantage is potentially with regard to access to parking, or the impact of increased parking on streets, and that's a legitimate concern. And for people living adjoining to areas of higher density, it can be quite troublesome. And I think the solution comes down to the good design, not just of the building and the development, but of the area, and tying in development of an area into a broader service provision and infrastructure provision plan. So I'm talking about providing on-site car parking, which most developments do, although some innovative developments aren't, for good reason. They're right next to supportive public transport, but also looking at your urban areas, so your streets, your footpaths, your public areas, designing them so that they encourage and support these alternative transports. So shade, I think shade is going to be a big issue in the future. This ties in with the issue of climate change. We are going to need shade in our public areas, and shelter. So shade at public transport, places where you will wait for public transport, or move, areas where you need great movement. Clearly and easy to walk paths, so people of all ages and abilities are able to walk with ease, which is, I think, significant for a growing older population. Providing safe passage, and not necessarily traffic lights or anything, but safe passage over reasonably busy streets. Someone, so a bike can get across, or a pram can get across and stop in the middle. All those sorts of things provide for a more accessible urban environment.
Natasha, would you say that it's about bringing those things, the pedestrians, the cyclists, more into focus when we're designing these
urban spaces?
The new urban spaces. So it's
absolutely
not, it's not seen as second-class citizens to motorists.
Yep.
But it's actually, the more that we give them attention and their needs, and like you said, safe passage, then
That's
the more we would expect it to be a use of walking, cycling, etc.
Yeah, and I guess this feeds into the advantages of high density development.
Maybe quite quickly, if you could.
Yeah, sure.
Give us some advantages, because we don't hear about them.
Sure. Access to services, infrastructure, schools, work, entertainment. With this is perhaps a reduced need for transport, reducing the environmental impact on the surrounding area of our Greater Melbourne, providing safe communal areas for outdoor play, so high density connected with, say, rooftop outdoor areas. That can provide an outdoor area and sense of community. Opportunity to rejuvenate areas of the city that might need to be rejuvenated, rebuilding for future technology such as electrical vehicles. But I think most importantly what it does is provides a social connection. So it provides an opportunity for accidental interaction. You start to talk to the people who are in your street, in your building, and you start to establish this sense of community. I think they're the big advantages.
Which is interesting, because it sort of goes against that Australian sort of pride in having your own patch and your own palace. With, the fence, but it's, maybe it is.
I hope that we are shifting towards, a greater acceptance of different styles of housing.
Well, I'd love to hear from the council, and just if you have just tuned in, we're coming to you from the Civic Centre here in Dandenong with Natasha Palich from the Council Alliance for a Sustainable Built Environment, Greg Hunt from the South East Council's Climate Change Alliance, as well as Ed Cotter and Mayor Sean O'Reilly from the City of Greater Dandenong. We're talking about urban development and density at the moment. So to the Mayor and Ed, what can Council do to deal with issues around urban development and its impact on the environment?
I think Natasha's right. I think we can and we must continue to strive to plan and manage some of these, I guess, competing issues more effectively. One of the key components we need to be mindful of is what we plan and build today will still be around in 50 years' time. So we have to bear that in mind and be very cognizant and careful about the process that we go through. A good example in terms of Council's integrated approach is the work that we're currently doing around the new res zones, which is looking at development and appropriate, housing stock requirements. So different types of houses, whether it be the typical Australian quarter-acre block or a smaller 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in the centre of one of the activity centres. So these new zones will actually lay out guidelines for what gets built where and how that's appropriate and what the other amenities and service requirements, whether that be, as Natasha was talking about, access to good public transport, access to good walkable streets and pedestrian access as part of that, looking at links to open space, etc., etc. All of those are extremely important, and this is something that Council's taking into account as part of this process. Another focus there, and the good thing that Natasha's picked up on, is the people or the community focus, placing them first as part of that decision-making process. That's essential. The way that we live in the future will very much determine, so for example, different demographics, different age brackets. I, for one, if I'm a 70-year-old, don't necessarily want to be looking after a quarter-acre block in the future. Whereas today, I might have a family with 3 kids, and I might need that space. So being able to transition from various different housing types and having that diversity in various different locations to meet those different needs is absolutely essential. That being said, high density in some of those activity centres, like what we're looking at in Springvale Noble Park in Dandenong, is critical to making sure that we can protect the nature of our existing neighbourhoods in certain areas. So having a focus on providing those central activity points which are vibrant, which bring the community together, which enable local residents to go out for a meal, go see a show, for example, the Drum Theatre, or come in for work on a regular basis is absolutely critical.
Well, I'd be keen to hear from the Mayor as well, because you're sort of facing the community and housing is a big issue for people.
Yeah, that's right. As a councillor and as Mayor, we get direct feedback from residents and listen to their concerns. So we certainly take those concerns on board, as well as communicating our long-term strategies. And local government and this council has a couple of areas that we have direct responsibility to. And the first one that's being mentioned is planning approvals. Applications are submitted to local council and we do a full assessment and either approve or not approve. And I think what's becoming clear is that we need a better mix of housing in the city of Greater Dandenong, and the reason for that is that not every person or family can live comfortably in an apartment, and also not everybody can afford a traditional house on a quarter-acre block with a big backyard. I'm sure we do. A lot of us would like it, but we all can't afford that. So the question is, how do we increase supply of the middle levels of housing that we know that will become more and more in demand? So council has direct control over that, both on a case-by-case planning approval basis and also as a long-term strategy. To this end, we've adopted our housing strategy, which is seeking to support a strong housing market in the City of Greater Dandenong that meets the community's needs. Council also has direct control over the maintenance of parks and gardens, open spaces. It's been mentioned, is going to be one of the things that we really need to consider if we are going to increase or decrease car use or encourage less car use across the municipality as we move to all the different mixed forms of residential development. So we have. I mean, local government does take a big share of that responsibility with open space, traffic and parking management, all those sorts of things.
Thank you. Well, remember, if you have any comments or questions during this panel session, feel free to post them on Twitter with the hashtag OurSay CGD, or you can text us on 0427 842 485. The next theme we're discussing is quite a big one, and that is carbon change and carbon emissions. On OurSay, Noel Wyndham suggested that Greater Dandenong should look at ways to help members of the community reduce their emissions, such as a carbon emissions reduction strategy with targets for the community and some programs behind that. Now, Christine Lagarde, who's the head of the IMF, the IMF there, said that unless we take action on climate change, future generations will be, as she said, roasted, toasted, fried and burned. Greg, why is it important that we reduce carbon emissions, and what are some of the impacts of climate change? Because I think a lot of people kind of hear this term being bandied around, climate change. It's quite a hot topic, excuse the pun, no pun intended. But I mean, seriously, what are the impacts of it? Because at the moment, I mean, we're not burning.
Well, I'm a bit concerned. Christine Lagarde is suggesting that we will be roasted, toasted, fried and burned, and I'm not keen on that. Look, we are seeing some of the impacts already. The problem comes about because we're putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. The solution, therefore, is to not do it. Now, how we do that, of course, easy to say, but a bit harder to do. What we're starting to find now, we have had a bit of a lucky escape this summer. We used to say once upon a time we looked forward to summer. These days we're fearful of it. And we're just worried about how many days will we lose to extreme fire. The heat waves that we're starting to see. I mean, last year we had 6 days above 40 degrees. Now when we get those protracted periods of extreme heat, it doesn't cool down at night, particularly elderly people and young kids, toddlers, are susceptible to heat stress, and so we do find quite a significant impact. Natasha said before the importance of shade. Well, that's something that will be fundamental. We have to start thinking about how we orient ourselves with regard to the looming heat that we're starting to see more often. I think the projections we had from the CSIRO and Bureau of Meteorology just last week, that Melbourne will become like Dubbo. Beautiful town, Dubbo. I'd love to visit it, but not in summer. And if we're starting to have that kind of impact, then it won't be pleasant.
Can you give us some examples though? Because we do hear that it's sort of, we're well into the sort of 11th hour sort of thing, and it's quite drastic and urgent. Can you give us some examples of what other countries are doing to address dangerous climate change?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of work that's underway. It's not the kind of stuff that we're going to get the good news stories about in the media, because media doesn't necessarily thrive on that sort of thing. But just this very weekend I received a tweet from people that I follow lauding South Korea just now launching the second largest carbon trading scheme in the world. That was just this weekend. China has 6 different carbon trading systems underway in different provinces and cities, so they can work out which is the most effective for them.
So maybe to go more specific to Noel's thing, because we're talking about countries there, what about councils? I mean, some councils throughout Australia have been certified as carbon neutral, specifically for their own corporate emissions that are coming out of the council buildings and things like that, and many have set broader targets for their municipality. The Melbourne City Council, for example, has a zero net emissions by 2020 policy, which is only 5 years from now. And I mean, Greg, can you tell us what is happening in the local council space throughout Victoria? What are people doing to reduce their emissions?
Look, I mean, local government is a success story in climate change response. I mean, internationally, there's a very big contest of ideas and directions. State government, again, we see some changing depending on the political complexion of who's in. Local government has been very active for a long time on climate change. And I suspect it's because government has very short feedback loops with community. If community wants something done, they get straight onto their local government, they tend to know who they are, they're in regular contact with them, and local government responds. And so we see things like, what councils do, of course, will vary from council to council. And while councils are responsible for their own corporate emissions, they can help the community make reductions, but it's really up to the community to play their part as well. And that's where council, in a leadership position, can show what the direction is. City of Casey, for example, which is in a very, very big growth phase, they have a target of reducing emissions by 15% on 2009-10 levels by 2016. City of Boroondara, 30 to 40% below 2007-8 levels by 2020. And as you made reference, City of Melbourne, Yarra and Moreland are already carbon neutral. So it'll really depend on the council, what their characteristics are, their population, their industrial base, whether they're in a growth area phase or whatever. So it's really up to councils to determine that themselves. But I think as far as the community is concerned, it's very important to see council doing something, because one, statement that this is important, we should be doing it, and two, and this is what we can do. And so like the new City of Greater Dandenong council buildings with its cogeneration unit, there's a great example of how we can reduce the carbon emissions by using energy more sensibly and on the run through saving dollars.
Absolutely.
Who doesn't like that?
Well, on that point, Mayor O'Reilly, what is actually council doing here? Because we've heard from everyone else, but
as has been mentioned, I think it's important that council leads somewhat by example with these things on what we do internally. I don't believe we've got a particular percentage goal, but that could be something that could be considered. But one of the ways that council plays a big role is in awareness of environmental issues amongst the festivals and events that we run. We've established a yearly sustainability festival. It's really going well, and a sustainability awards program where we bring different sections of the community, so some private, not-for-profit organisations, and they all come to that one event to present what they've got to offer as far as environmental sustainability. So we're doing that. We also have an annual State of the Environment report that highlights a range of measures that council and the community are taking to reduce carbon emissions. But so I'd say with the environment, council, if you look at the three levels of government, council does not have as much direct control as the federal and state government have as far as their policy levers, carbon trading schemes, funding more directly, green programs and so forth. But as has been mentioned, local government considers itself the closest level of government to the community, and it's that awareness part that we can really play a strong role in that.
And I guess it'll be interesting to see with your State of the Environment report and the Sustainability Festival, as you're sort of getting those two coming together, the people and the science, maybe it will be sort of, I guess, pushing things in a new direction.
It's the more, look, with these things, the community's aware of it, but it's taking time to think about it. So the more that council can encourage people, we all know what we should do or what we can do as individual citizens, the more that council says, let's just think about this for a minute, we can get change that way.
Ed, what role will the environment have on this?
I'm finding it very interesting to look at the relationship between the environment, local community and the economy. Highlighted through the comments made by the head of the IMF, talking about us getting roasted, toasted, fried and burned. Someone that's really dealing in macroeconomic issues, talking about climate change is quite profound. For us, it highlights to me that if we want to have a healthy economy, we need to have a healthy local community. If we want to have a healthy local community, we need to have a healthy environment to support it. So our new environment plan that we're in the process of drafting will start to tie a lot of those key issues together. But as part of that, we also need to go back and ask the broader community, what are some of the objectives that we need to incorporate in that? I'll obviously we as council need to show leadership, and we'll be doing that. But we also need to respond to the key issues raised by the local community and also the business sector too.
And that's what this environment plan is as well. You've gone on OurSay and you've put this forum up, so you're going to, hopefully this environment plan will come together at some point in the near future, and we'll see a bit of that.
Absolutely. Look, our intention is to go back out before the end of the financial year with the draft version of the plan, and then incorporate key feedback from both corporate industry as well as the broader community, but also make sure that it's, I guess, a set of manageable goals and objectives that we can deliver on. Greg did mention before that several of these councils have achieved carbon neutral status, and that's fantastic, but that's also through the means of using offsets, and I don't necessarily agree with the use of offsets. It's a little bit easy sometimes just to pay, what's it, $2 a tonne to offset your carbon emissions.
Well, and those are also quite wealthy councils as well. So, well, now to some of the questions that have been coming through from you online on Twitter and on the text line there. So we're going the old-fashioned way, I believe, where it's being relayed by pen and paper. So we've got them coming through. It's oh, there we go.
So these are written out from the Twitter.
These are written from Twitter, yes. We've got them coming on Twitter, and then somebody kind of Morse codes them in for us. Okay. So we'll translate them. So we've got a question here. Would you make buildings around train stations like Noble Park and would more buildings around train stations like Noble Park and Springvale mean less cars on the road?
Okay. Well, the point is we've got to accommodate, and this council has a strong housing growth strategy because we need to increase supply of housing. So the question after that is, where do you put the housing? Do you put it in residential suburban areas? Do you put it in new estates like Keysborough? Or do you put it near transport infrastructure with trains and bus services? And what's been found and what the strategy is that if you put higher density housing near the transport infrastructure, then it's more likely that people will not be using cars. Mm-hmm. Nothing's ever guaranteed, and there's no planning application given out that says that the occupants have to walk or cycle or use public transport. But generally we could say, and this is the experience of higher density cities overseas, if you have that transport, the more convenient that the transport infrastructure is to that person living there, the more likely they are to use it. So the answer to the original question is, which was...
Oh, sorry, yes. Well, will that translate, having more buildings, yes. And I assume taller buildings, yes. Around those stations, reduce public transport? Because, I mean, especially that area, once you go near the roads, it is pretty...
Yeah. So does it mean less cars on the road? It means, yes, there will be less cars on the road compared with if you put that more buildings or more residences in other places. That's what it equates to.
But not only does it mean less cars on the road, which means less emissions being released, it also means more time in communities. If you have a look at the Monash Freeway at peak hour, and there are people who are in that linear car park, and the commute suburbs can easily be more than an hour. Now, that's time that they're not spending in their communities, not spending with their families, not spending volunteering, running sports programs. There's all sorts of issues are created because people have to get to work. Now, if you've got public transport and people are living much closer to it, then it's more efficient, there's less emissions, and they've got more time with their families and their communities. And really, again, all of that's to like. We should be doing it.
Absolutely. We are running a bit over time, but just another 5 or so minutes. I want to say thank you to our panel and everyone as well in the community that posted ideas or joined us on social media. To the council, we've asked people for their ideas on the environment. What is council going to do next?
Okay, well, as Ed mentioned, there's the draft environment plan that has taken feedback from residents. But I would encourage all residents that are interested in the environment or that have questions or things that they want to put forward. They don't have to wait for us to do another environment plan or a particular cycle of consultation. We've got 11 councillors for the City of Greater Dandenong, and their contact details are on the council website. So by all means, they are elected to listen to you. So make sure that if you have ideas or if you have questions on what the council is doing on some of the things that we've mentioned, then contact them and you should expect a response.
Wonderful. Ed?
I think I've got a bit of work to do.
Fantastic. Now, and any final comments from the panel about what we've discussed today? Or?
I'm just pleased to see the way that it's together. So the climate change response is not just the Environment Department's issue, it's also in the health plan for the council. It's also part of the recreation plan. Have we got the sports facilities that have got good shade, where we've got water on our ovals? So all of these things come together, and you'd almost like to think climate change provides us with the opportunity to bring together a whole lot of different ideas in a single response. Now, I'm not saying therefore it's a good thing, but in responding to it, we can make sure we've got all of the issues covered that we need to.
And there's a range of benefits that you're going to get from this as well. You're going to get environmental benefits, you're going to get economic benefits, and you're also going to get health and comfort. Yep. Yep.
Definitely, absolutely. Well, thank you again to everyone, and don't forget that this forum will be available to view anytime at oursay.org/Greater Dandenong, and you can keep posting your comments on Twitter using the hashtag OurSayCGD, or by texting on 0427 842 485, and also a video of this will be available on that site and will be posted to council's social media.
And if I could just mention the Greater Dandenong Family Sustainability Festival will be held at Dandenong Market on Sunday the 22nd of March. So I'll be there, councillors will be there, council staff will be there, so I think it will be a great event, and I'd encourage everybody to attend.
Very good.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, and thanks to our panel, Natasha Palich from the Council Alliance for a Sustainable Built Environment, Greg Hunt from the South East Council's Climate Change Alliance, Ed Cotter from the City of Greater Dandenong, and Mayor Sean O'Reilly from the City of Greater Dandenong as well. I'm OurSay, and thank you for joining, and we hope to join you next time.